The ceiling above my head groaned every time the upstairs neighbors moved. A cold draft slipped through the cracks in the basement window, carrying the faint smell of damp concrete. My rent for this place? $900 a month, which was already a stretch for me. Last night, I lay on my sagging mattress and heard laughter. Not from the neighbors. From my parents, upstairs, at my sister's brand new $2 million condo. The one they had just given her. I stared at the spiderweb in the corner, wondering how this became my life. I'd worked since I was 16, paid my own bills, never asked them for a cent. But for her, they signed a check big enough to buy her the skyline. My phone buzzed with a picture from my sister, Rebecca, her standing in the middle of her massive, sunlit living room, holding a champagne flute. The caption read, "Finally home." I set the phone down. My fingertips were numb. They always told us we were equal, but equality, I guess, came with marble floors for her and mold stains for me. Have you ever realized your family sees you as less, no matter how hard you try? I still remember the summer evenings when Rebecca and I would chase fireflies in our backyard. We lived in a small two-story house in upstate New York, the kind with creaky floorboards and the smell of Mom's apple pie lingering long after dinner. Rebecca was 3 years younger than me, but she always ran faster, laughed louder, and found a way to convince me to give her the last cookie. Back then, I didn't mind. I was the big sister. My job was to protect her, to cheer her on, to keep her secrets. Dad would sit on the porch, his boots resting on the railing, sipping sweet tea while Mom called us in from the yard. We'd come inside with our knees scraped and hair tangled, and Mom would wrap us in towels still warm from the dryer. In those moments, it felt like we were a team, me and Rebecca, against the world. Rebecca was the dreamer. She wanted to be an actress, a painter, a singer, sometimes all in the same week. I was the planner, the one who'd remind her, "You need to finish your science project before you can audition for the school play." She'd roll her eyes, but always listen. We shared a bedroom until I was 16. On school nights, we'd lie in our twin beds and whisper until Mom yelled from downstairs for us to go to sleep. We'd talk about who we liked, what we'd name our future dogs, and how we'd live next door to each other when we grew up. Sometimes I really believed we would. Even as kids, there were small differences. On Christmas mornings, Rebecca's gifts always seemed a little bigger, a little shinier. One year, she got a brand new bike with a pink bow, while I unwrapped a refurbished secondhand one. Mom brushed it off with, "Well, yours is more practical. You'll grow out of pink fast." I didn't think much of it. I told myself older kids didn't need as much fuss. At Rebecca's 10th birthday party, Dad spent nearly $400 renting a magician, a cotton candy machine, and a bounce house. When I turned 13 that same year, we had cake at home with just the four of us. "Teenagers don't like big parties," Mom said with a smile. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she wasn't. By high school, our paths began to split. I got a part-time job at the local grocery store to save for college. Rebecca joined the cheerleading team, and my parents never missed a single one of her games. I'd come home from work to find the three of them on the couch, laughing about something that happened at the stadium. Still, I didn't resent her. Not then. She was my sister. I told myself we just had different lives. When I got my acceptance letter to a state university, Dad hugged me and said he was proud. But I noticed how his face lit up even brighter when Rebecca landed a lead role in her school's spring play. Mom cried during Rebecca's performance, clutching her chest like it was the most important moment in the world. My graduation? They came, they smiled for photos, but I didn't see tears. I left for college at 18. I worked 2 jobs, one at the campus library and another at a diner, to cover what my partial scholarship didn't. I learned how to live on ramen, thrift store clothes, and an ancient laptop that overheated if I opened more than 2 tabs. Rebecca stayed home, went to community college for a year, and then dropped out to figure herself out. Mom and Dad didn't mind. They let her live rent-free, paid for her acting classes, even bought her a used car so she could get to auditions. When I called home, they'd hand the phone to her almost immediately. She'd tell me about the place she was in, or the modeling shoot she had lined up. I'd tell her about my exams, but I always got the feeling she wasn't really listening. In my junior year, I had an emergency. My car, a beat-up old sedan I'd bought for $900, broke down completely. I called Dad, voice shaking, asking if they could help me cover repairs. He sighed and said, "Sweetie, things are tight right now. Maybe you can take the bus for a while." A week later, Rebecca posted on Instagram about the new wardrobe Mom had bought her for a photo shoot. I swallowed the hurt. Told myself it wasn't worth bringing up. After graduation, I moved to the city, rented that $900 per month basement apartment, and took a job as a paralegal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I budgeted carefully, bought groceries in bulk, and kept a jar for spare change on my kitchen counter. Rebecca? She bounced between jobs, dating men who promised to make her a star. Mom and Dad kept helping, covering her rent when she couldn't, paying her phone bill, even giving her cash for emergencies that always seemed to involve vacations. Every so often, they'd invite me to dinner at their house. I'd sit at the table listening to them gush about Rebecca's potential and how one big break would change her life. They'd ask me about work as an afterthought, like it was a boring commercial break between exciting scenes. Despite all of it, I loved my family. I kept showing up for birthdays, for holidays, for Sunday lunches. I kept buying thoughtful gifts, sending cards, making time, even when it meant skipping overtime pay. I believed, maybe foolishly, that love would even things out eventually. Rebecca was my little sister. No matter how much the scales tipped in her favor, I told myself my role was to root for her, to be there, to keep the connection alive. I didn't know it yet, but that belief, that loyalty, would be the very thing that made what came next cut so deep. It started subtly. Little moments that, at first, I shrugged off as nothing. One Sunday afternoon, I went over to my parents' place for lunch. The table was set with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and Mom's famous green bean casserole. But when I sat down, I noticed only 3 wine glasses. "Where's mine?" I asked lightly. "Oh," Mom said, glancing at Rebecca, who was already pouring red wine into her glass. "We only had enough of the nice wine for 3. There's soda in the fridge, honey." It was small, trivial, even. But I couldn't remember the last time Rebecca had been the one asked to settle for less. Dinner conversations began to feel like I was an audience member in a show starring my sister. Rebecca would launch into long stories about her new acting coach, the man she was dating, the amazing energy of her latest photo shoot. Mom and Dad leaned in, nodding, their eyes glowing like she was reciting Shakespeare. When I spoke about work, the legal cases I'd been helping with, or the pro bono project I was volunteering for, Dad would check his watch, or Mom would clear plates early. Once, I mentioned a big win at work. I'd helped the firm avoid a lawsuit, saving the client over $300,000. Dad nodded absent-mindedly, then immediately turned to Rebecca and said, "So, tell us more about that director you met." I remember one weekend when I asked if I could bring laundry over. The machines at my building were broken, and I didn't have the cash for a laundromat. When I arrived, I found my parents in the driveway unloading shopping bags from their car. I carried my laundry basket inside and caught sight of Rebecca on the couch, surrounded by new designer clothes. She needed a wardrobe refresh, Mom said when I raised an eyebrow. The audition season is coming. Later, I went to start my laundry only to find the machine full. I pulled out Rebecca's clothes, still damp and warm. She'd done 3 loads already, all of them brand new outfits. One afternoon, I was helping Dad in the garage when he mentioned Rebecca's car was on its last legs. "I'm thinking of giving her mine," he said casually, wiping his hands on a rag. "What about you?" I asked. "Oh, I'll figure something out. Maybe get a used truck." I stared at him. My own car was older than hers and had twice as many miles. But that thought never seemed to cross his mind. Thanksgiving that year was tense. My parents' dining room smelled of turkey and cinnamon, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. At one point, Mom pulled out her phone to show Aunt Linda a video of Rebecca performing at a local theater. "She's so talented," Aunt Linda gushed. "When she makes it big, you'll all be living in luxury." Mom laughed and said, "Oh, we already help her plenty now." She winked, as if it was an inside joke. I forced a smile, but something in my chest tightened. What exactly did plenty mean? A few weeks later, my firm announced an opening for a higher-paying position. I was nervous but excited. The pay bump could finally help me move out of the basement apartment. I told my parents about it over Sunday dinner. "That's great, honey," Dad said, barely looking up from carving roast beef. Rebecca tilted her head. "But wouldn't that mean more hours? You already work so much. Maybe you should think about work-life balance." I bit back a retort. This was coming from someone who hadn't worked a full-time job in years. On my 30th birthday, my parents invited me over for cake. It was just us, a store-bought cheesecake, and a single candle. The following month, for Rebecca's 27th birthday, they threw a lavish rooftop party at a downtown hotel. Open bar, live band, catered hors d'oeuvres. I found out about it through her Instagram posts, even though I had been there in person. I was in half the pictures, standing off to the side, holding a glass of water. Every time my parents visited my basement apartment, they'd make little comments. "Wow, it's so cozy. You really should get more sunlight, honey." Well, it's not forever, right? But when I visited Rebecca's rented loft, paid partly by them, they'd gush about her great taste and how it feels just like a movie set. One evening, I came over to drop off a birthday gift for Mom. As I walked in, I overheard Dad in the kitchen telling Rebecca, "Don't worry about money. We'll always take care of you." I froze. Not because he said it, but because I couldn't remember the last time anyone had said those words to me. That night, lying in bed in my basement apartment, I stared at the ceiling and told myself I was imagining things. I didn't want to believe what my gut was screaming, that maybe, to them, I'd never been the priority. I still didn't know that the truth, the proof, was just around the corner. It was a gray Thursday morning when it happened. I was at my desk at the law firm, typing up a brief, when my phone buzzed. It was a group text from Rebecca. "Rebecca, big news. Image attachment." I tapped the photo. It was Rebecca standing in front of a gleaming, glass-front high-rise downtown. The kind of building where the lobby smells like expensive cologne and the doorman wears a tailored suit. She was holding a massive, shiny silver key tied with a gold ribbon. The caption read, "Welcome to my new home." I blinked, confused. Rebecca's lease still had months left, and she'd been complaining just last week about being broke. Another text popped up, this one from Mom. "Mom, we are so proud of her. Can't wait for you to see it." I called Mom right away. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked. "Oh, didn't she tell you?" Mom's voice was bubbling with excitement. "We bought her a condo. It's gorgeous, honey. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, views of the river." "You bought her a condo?" I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Well, yes," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She's been working so hard, and we wanted to give her some stability. You know, an investment in her future." I swallowed hard. "How much?" There was a pause, as if she knew the number might sting. "Around 2 million. But it's worth it. Real estate downtown is." I didn't hear the rest. My ears were ringing. 2 days later, I went to see the place. Rebecca had invited a bunch of friends for a condo warming. The elevator ride to the 28th floor felt like it lasted an eternity. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with plush carpet. The walls were painted a calming cream, and there was soft music playing from hidden speakers. I could smell fresh flowers, not the grocery store kind, but the expensive, delicate kind that wilt after 3 days but make you feel like royalty while they last. Rebecca flung the door open, beaming. "Welcome to my palace," she laughed. The living room alone was bigger than my entire basement apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with light, and beyond them, the city's skyline glittered like it had been placed there just for her. The kitchen had marble counters, a double oven, and a wine fridge stocked to the brim. At some point, I found myself standing next to Dad by the kitchen island. "It's beautiful," I said quietly. He smiled, not catching the strain in my voice. "She deserves it. She's been through a lot, you know?" I almost laughed. Through a lot? I thought about the years I'd worked double shifts, the nights I'd eaten canned soup to save money, the way I'd never once asked them for help. What about me? I heard myself say before I could stop it. Dad looked at me, puzzled. What do you mean? I mean, do I deserve something? Anything? He sighed. Sweetie, you're doing fine. You've always been independent. You don't need our help like she does. There it was. The truth, spoken so casually I almost missed the knife twisting in my gut. I didn't stay long after that. As I waited for the elevator, I could still hear Rebecca's laughter echoing from the condo. My reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator looked pale, almost unrecognizable. Outside, the winter wind bit into my cheeks. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking to the subway. My boots slipped on patches of ice, and every step felt heavier than the last. When I finally got home, the basement felt colder than usual. The single overhead bulb flickered, casting shadows on the cracked concrete walls. I sat on the edge of my bed, the hum of the small space heater filling the silence. I thought about the smell of fresh lilies in Rebecca's condo versus the faint odor of damp in mine. The gleam of her marble counters versus the peeling laminate in my kitchenette. The sound of her friends' laughter versus the steady drip of water from the pipe above my sink. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry, not the quiet tears you wipe away, but the ugly, gasping sobs that leave you hollow. Somewhere between those sobs, a thought rose up, clear and bitter. They didn't just give her a condo. They confirmed what I felt my whole life, that I am, and always have been, second place. It took me 3 days to gather the courage. 3 days of replaying the conversation with Dad, of seeing Rebecca's smile against that glittering skyline, of feeling the cold of my basement walls seep into my bones. By Sunday, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon, the sky heavy with low gray clouds. The windshield wipers squeaked with every pass, like they were impatient too. I gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile, my heart hammering. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Rebecca's car wasn't there. I felt a strange relief. I wasn't ready for her to be part of this. Not yet. Mom was in the kitchen, arranging fresh flowers in a vase. Dad was at the table reading the Sunday paper. The scene was so normal, so ordinary, that for a moment I almost lost my nerve. But then Dad looked up and smiled casually. Hey, kiddo. What's up? I sat down across from him. We need to talk. Mom paused, hands still on the flowers. Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. No. Not really. I saw the condo, I said. Mom's face lit up. Isn't it beautiful? Rebecca is so lucky. That's exactly the point. I cut in. She's lucky because you made her lucky. You gave her $2 million worth of lucky. Meanwhile, I'm living in a $900 basement apartment with mold on the walls. Dad folded his paper slowly, as if buying himself time. Honey, we've been over this. Rebecca needed the help. I leaned forward, my voice trembling. Not with fear, but with anger I'd been swallowing for years. And I didn't? I've never needed anything. I've worked since I was 16. I've paid every bill, covered every emergency, never once asked you for a cent, except the time my car broke down in college and you told me to take the bus. Mom opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. Do you even realize what that says to me? That my independence isn't something you admire. It's an excuse for you to give me less. That Rebecca's mistakes are just opportunities for you to rescue her, while my struggles are proof I can handle more alone. Dad rubbed his temples. It's not about that. You've always been strong. No, I said sharply. Don't call it strength when what you mean is neglect. The word hung in the air like smoke. I pulled a small, folded piece of paper from my bag, a handwritten list I'd made over the past week. I'd gone through old photos, journals, even Facebook posts, writing down every moment that had stuck with me. The birthday parties, the Christmas gifts, the times Rebecca got something bigger, better, more. I slid it across the table. Look at it. All of it. This didn't start with the condo. This has been my entire life. Mom glanced at it, her lips pressing into a thin line. We didn't keep score. I didn't either, I said. Until it became impossible not to see the pattern. From my coat pocket, I pulled out the small silver house key they'd given me when I was 18, the one that unlocked the back door of this house. I'd kept it all these years, a quiet reminder that no matter how far I went, this was still home. I placed it on the table. "I don't think I need this anymore," I said. Mom's eyes widened. "Don't be dramatic. This isn't drama. This is me setting a boundary. If you see me as strong enough to stand alone, then I will. Completely. But don't expect me to sit at your table smiling while you hand Rebecca palaces and give me leftovers." Dad looked stunned, like he'd never expected me to speak to him this way. Mom's face shifted between guilt and defensiveness. "You're twisting this," she said finally. "We love you both." "You love us differently," I interrupted. "And maybe you can't see it, but I can. And I won't unsee it just because it makes dinner more comfortable." I stood up, sliding my chair back slowly. My legs felt steady, steadier than they'd been in years. "If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built on fairness, or at least honesty. Not on pretending that this doesn't hurt." Neither of them said anything. The silence was heavy, but it was mine now. I'd earned it. I walked to the door, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside. The cold air hit my face, sharp and clean. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving their house feeling smaller. I was leaving knowing exactly how big I could stand. The first thing I noticed when I got back to my apartment was the silence. Not the usual muffled footsteps of the upstairs neighbor or the distant hum of the fridge, but an emotional silence, like my own mind was too stunned to speak. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the cracked paint on the wall. I had replayed that confrontation in my head 100 times before it happened, imagined tears, shouting, maybe even some miraculous apology. But instead, it had ended with stillness. My words sat on their kitchen table along with that silver key, and I'd walked away without knowing if they'd ever pick them up. That night, my phone buzzed. One text from Mom. "We love you. Please don't shut us out." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a plea that I keep the door open so things could go back to the way they were. I didn't reply. By morning, there was another. "Rebecca wants to talk to you." I imagined what that conversation would be, her saying I was overreacting, that I didn't understand how hard it was for her to get that condo, maybe even telling me I was jealous. I put my phone face down and left it there. 2 days later, I met up with my friend Emily at a little coffee shop downtown. She'd been my sounding board for years, the one person who saw the favoritism clearly without me having to explain every detail. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or look shocked. She just nodded slowly. "It was time," she said. "You've been carrying that weight for so long. You didn't even realize how heavy it was." I stared into my latte. What if they never speak to me again? Emily shrugged. "Then, at least you'll know the truth about where you stand. And you won't spend the rest of your life begging for scraps of fairness." Her words stung because I knew she was right. A week later, Rebecca posted a new video tour of her condo. It popped up on my feed by accident. She'd tagged a few mutual friends. Her voice was bubbly as she showed off her walk-in closet, the wine fridge, the balcony view of the city skyline. "All thanks to Mom and Dad for making this dream possible," she giggled at the end, blowing a kiss to the camera. I closed the app, so fast my thumb hurt. The wound was still fresh, and every time I thought it might scab over, something like that ripped it open again. Then something happened I didn't expect. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I got a letter in the mail. Not from my parents, from my Aunt Linda. She'd heard about the scene from my mom, but instead of lecturing me, she wrote, "I've always admired your independence, but I've also seen how much more has been put on your shoulders. You weren't wrong to speak up. I hope you know that." It was the first piece of validation I'd gotten from anyone in the family, and I clung to it like a life raft. There were still nights when I lay awake, staring at the shadows on my ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake. What if my parents saw this as betrayal? What if they quietly rewrote the family story so that I became the difficult child, the one who pulled away for no reason? But then I'd remember that kitchen table. The way my dad avoided eye contact, the way my mom dismissed years of inequality with a wave of her hand. That wasn't love in action. That was love with conditions. One Sunday morning, I took out my phone and drafted a message. I'm not cutting you out, but I'm not coming back to the way things were. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be one where I'm not treated as less. Until then, I'll keep my distance. I read it twice before hitting send. It wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was just true. Hours later, my dad responded. Well, think about what you said. No promises. No denial. Just that. And maybe that was enough for now. It's been a month since I walked out of their kitchen. My life hasn't magically transformed. My apartment is still small, my job still exhausting, my bank account still fragile. But something inside me has shifted. I don't spend my nights wishing they'd see me differently. I don't measure my worth against what Rebecca is handed. And I don't hold on to that silver key anymore. Because I finally realized I don't need to unlock a door to a place that never truly welcomed me. When I stopped chasing their approval, I didn't expect to feel lighter. I thought the absence of their constant validation would feel like a loss, like I'd be wandering through life without an anchor. But instead, I realized the anchor had been the weight holding me in place all along. The first weekend after everything, I went out and bought myself a small potted plant. Nothing extravagant, just a green little thing with leaves shaped like hearts. I put it on my kitchen counter, and every morning I'd water it while my coffee brewed. It became my quiet reminder that growth doesn't have to be dramatic or gifted by someone else. Sometimes it's just showing up for yourself, day after day. I started saying yes to things I'd once turned down because I was always waiting for their approval. Emily invited me to a pottery class. I went, even though I'm terrible at anything involving clay. My coworker asked if I wanted to join their trivia team. I said yes, even though I knew nothing about 80s music. And slowly, my days began to fill with moments that had nothing to do with my family's narrative of who I was supposed to be. Rebecca still posts about her life, the expensive vacations, the designer clothes, the endless renovations to a condo she didn't have to earn. But now, I scroll past without that familiar twist in my stomach. Because I know her journey isn't mine. And mine? It's worth something too, even without the gloss. I still talk to my parents, but on my terms. Short phone calls, polite check-ins, no deep dives into the old wounds unless they're ready to face them. The first time my mom asked if I was still upset, I told her calmly, I'm not upset. I'm just done pretending it never happened. She didn't reply right away. But she didn't hang up either. For the first time in years, I feel like I have a choice. To engage or not. To share or keep things to myself. To walk into a family gathering knowing that my worth isn't measured by how much they give me, but by how much I value myself. That choice is freedom. I don't think I'll ever fully stop wishing things had been different. But I'm learning to live with the reality instead of the fantasy. And maybe one day, they'll see me not as the daughter who could manage without them, but as the daughter they should have chosen to stand beside. Until then, I'll keep building a life that feels like mine, even if it's smaller, even if it's quieter, even if it's entirely self-made. Because that, I've realized, is the kind of inheritance no one can take away. People think unfairness comes in loud, dramatic moments, screaming matches, slammed doors, or cruel words. But sometimes it comes quietly. It's in the empty mailbox when you expect a card that never arrives. It's in the polite smiles that hide the truth. You were never the chosen one. For years, I thought that meant I had to try harder, be better, earn my place in their hearts. But now I know the truth. Some people will never see the way you deserve to be seen. And that's okay. Because I see me. I see the woman who survived without the safety nets they gave my sister. I see the woman who built her own ground to stand on. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see the girl left out of the will. I see the one who wrote her own.